Pleasure to welcome Reverend Brent Holliday. We're going to be talking about becoming a child again.
I'm here. My name is Brent. I'm here with my wife, Katie, today. It's good to be here. I think I was here in December. I'm part of the Buddhist group that meets in the back on Saturdays. You're always welcome to join us, by the way. What we do is not that complicated. We just sit around for an hour and try not to think about anything. And I think most of us could probably do that. But you're always welcome to come and join us. I love your property here. I always get here early on Saturdays and sort of wander. I think I shared about finches the last time, and they're not back yet, although I did speak with a mockingbird yesterday. Mockingbirds are sort of the John Coltrane of birds. They have no particular song, and they ad-lib a lot. But I love wandering your grounds. I love seeing what children have done, because every Saturday I get to see that, and I like that, and that sort of ties in what I'll be talking about today. I'm going to talk about children. I'm going to talk about becoming a child again. I have a thesis which I will put up front right now, and that is, what is it to be a child? What is it as an adult to become a child? And that is that a child lives in constant wonder. A child lives in constant wonder. A child is eyes open. Everything is new. Everything is fresh. Nothing is old. Everything is an experience. Jesus said the following, and by the way, I always judge whether Jesus actually said it by, if I can't understand it, I'm pretty sure he said it. Matthew tells us at that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." I had a professor in seminary. I went to a fairly conservative seminary, who one day talked about Jesus being perfect. And he said, with Jesus being perfect, with perfect pitch, he felt everything, saw all suffering, he felt that in his being. Which may be true, but I believe also that Jesus felt every joy in his being. That he saw the world in wonder. Sometimes we kind of downplay that part of him. But Jesus was a child of God himself and saw the world with eyes open and loved it. I have a quote here from that great sage, Bob Dylan, that I really love. It's from a song called Jokerman that he wrote in the 80s. And the song goes like this. Jokerman danced to the nightingale tune. Bird fly high by the light of the moon. Oh, Jokerman. Well, the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, the law of the jungle and the sea are your only teachers. In the smoke of the twilight, one white steed, Michelangelo indeed could have carved out your features. Resting in the fields, far from the turbulent space. And here's the line. Half asleep near the stars with a small dog licking your face. I am not lying for sake of presentation, but literally I was writing that out on this piece of paper, and the small dog I own, this Chihuahua, came in and licked my face. So I took that as a sign of approval. I'd like to share an experience I had several years ago. I don't think I've ever shared this publicly. I was visiting my daughter in Oregon, and I'd had about a week off, which was I was pretty decompressed. You know, it takes some time. I was pretty decompressed, and we were driving towards the Oregon coast, and I suddenly had an epiphany or a revelation, or I don't know. And it went something like this. It went, Brent, you were okay already when you started out. You were okay already when you started out. I didn't know what that meant. I thought about it. And I thought about it some more. That when I was a child, I was already okay. I was already all right. If I walked up to you right now and shook your hand and said, hi, I'm a history degree, you'd think I was crazy. I'm not a history degree. I'm not my achievements. I'm not this. I'm not that. I'm Brent. And I was okay when I first started out. Achievements are great, but I didn't need those achievements to be Brent. I didn't need those achievements to be whole. I was already okay. I had already everything. To be a child is to live in constant wonder, and that's what Jesus says we are to be children who live in constant wonder. And he says you got to turn, people, to become that child to inherit the kingdom of God. We have to turn and become children again. We have to let go of all that non-children stuff, all that knowledge that is accumulated in our head that gets in the way of seeing things brightly and joyfully just as they are, without being cluttered. To be a child is to live in constant wonder. I was a child once. Seems like a long time ago. I was raised in the country in rural Idaho in the 60s and in the 70s. I was raised in farm country. My father wasn't a farmer, he was a truck driver, but we lived on 3 acres in a house he had built right after World War II. And I remember those years, especially the years up to about 5 or 6, with great wonder, because I seemed to have embraced everything in front of me. I can remember being 5 or 6 and starting a new day. I remember the sound of the screen door as it closed behind me. I remember the cold concrete underneath my feet. I remember the morning chill on my face. I remember my old BB gun and the wooden stock as I walked out the door that day to be some kind of warrior. I remember the feel of the paper bag that my mother handed me as I walked out the door, the nuzzle of my dog on my hand. I remember how big 3 acres looks like when you're only 3 feet high. It's huge. It goes on forever. I remember our barnyard area and the gravel, feeling the gravel underneath my feet. I remember the fruit room where we raised all the garden stuff and the burnt side and the story of how my mom prayed and the wind shifted. I remember the smell and feel of that dried dog food as I reached in my hand and I put it in the bag so my dog and I could have lunch together. I remember looking down the field, seeing my brother's treehouse. I remember crawling underneath the electric fence and hearing the buzz, buzz of the electricity. I remember the pasture under my feet. I remember the horse and the cow that we owned. And pardon me, but I remember looking out across the field and seeing what we called cow pies, which came from the cow. And I remember, listen to me, if you're 5 years old and you got a BB gun and bare feet, what do? You just walk right through the middle. And I remember that because I felt like a king standing in the middle of that. I remember looking across and seeing the milk cows on the way, and the milk cows slowly chewing and looking at me with this look on their face that said, "He'll go far." But I remember I felt like a king. In the middle of that, I remember feeling so alive. I walked down through the field, jumped the ditch. Often it seemed so huge, like a river, but it was only about like that. Sometimes I'd miss it and fall in the water. I remember shooting at bugs in the water and always missing. I remember all these things, but here's the problem. Why can't I remember what I did yesterday? Why can I not remember what I did yesterday? To be a child is to live in constant wonder, but I grew up. I became an adult. I lost the wonder. I filled my head with all kinds of stuff, all kinds of knowledge, and all kinds of certainty. I went to seminary and stayed there 5 years and earned two degrees so I could describe who God is. I filled my head with knowledge, and I became an adult. But the reality is, to be a child is to live in constant wonder. To be a child is to turn, Jesus says, and become like children, to enter the kingdom of heaven. That's what Christ tells us. In this passage, it's interesting. I've heard this passage preached at least a dozen times. I've probably preached it a half dozen times myself, but I'm not sure that I got it until that moment in Oregon, when I realized that Jesus was talking about wonder. And when I started out, I had wonder, and wonder was all I needed. Wonder was all I needed, and the joy that came from wonder. People guess what this verse means: humility, innocence, faith. But Jesus is talking about wonder, to make a turn so we can see the kingdom, so we can see wonder. In Buddhism, we call this child mind. People often think that Buddhists are escaping reality, but it's just the opposite. In Buddhism, you're spending your time getting rid of all the confusion so you can see things clearly for the first time. It's not about denial. It's about really seeing things. Seeing things as if for the first time, and we call that child mind. I wrote down a few things to sort of get back to child mind. These are sort of random, so bear with me. The first one, which you've already done today, is just breathe. Just breathe. I work as a therapist. My clients look at me crazy because every once in a while I'll tell one, if you spend 5 minutes every morning just breathing, close your eyes and follow your breath, it'll change your life. Because in breathing, we come back to ourselves. We become centered. All this scattered stuff falls away, and we come back to our child self. We come back to who we really are. Secondly, and again, these are sort of random, forgive other people. Because kids do. Kids forgive other people. I went on a forgiveness journey myself, doing church work, difficult, had some troubles with boards and whatnot. I had an accumulation of people that I was not too fond of. I remember spending 1 month praying for these people to be forgiven, and I prayed through gritted teeth for them to be forgiven. And then the next month I could pray without gritted teeth. And then the next month I could actually pray for them to be forgiven and actually believe it. But it set me free. Got rid of all those cobwebs. Become non-judgmental, because children are non-judgmental. C.S. Lewis wrote an essay, and it was called The Trouble with X. And the idea of the essay was, as you're criticizing someone else is criticizing you. You're X. X marks the spot. Another one, turn away from things you can't change. We tend to beat our heads against the wall. I should look like a Muslim at this point and have a bruise right here. We beat our heads against the wall over things we cannot change. I spent some time with this one, too. I spent a year or so, I did an experiment, and every time I got to something that I could not change at that moment or in that day, I would go around it. Maybe come back to it tomorrow, maybe not, but I would go around it. And the next day I'd find another thing, and I'd go around it. Can't change it today. I became a child. I wasn't trying to solve problems too big that I couldn't solve. Another one, practice serious mindfulness. I'm glad I hear that there's at least 2 opportunities here during the week to practice mindfulness. I go to work and I get out of my truck and I do the same thing every day. I get out of my truck, I close my truck, and I stand there and I ask myself this question: do you see? Are you just getting to your office? Or do you see? Do you see the trees? Do you see the shops? Do you see the people? Do you see the homeless guy? Can you smell the breakfast from the restaurant? And I walk that way all the way to my office. And then I try to spend the rest of the day that way, mindful with people, being very present. But mindfulness, you have to practice it. It's not natural because we stray, right? To be focused, you have to practice. A couple good ways to practice. One is what I call the see, no see, see again. Sit down and look at something. Then close your eyes for 1 or 2 minutes. And then open your eyes and look at that thing again. It's amazing. It's an amazing exercise. And you'll begin to see it fresh. Another exercise that I do frequently is called the gratefulness exercise. If you spend 10 minutes every morning rehearsing, going over in your mind things that you should be grateful for, and it doesn't matter what they are. They can be the cat. In fact, I like to resurrect stuff I should be. It could be the cat. It could be the sky. Could be your child, but to rehearse for about 10 minutes in your mind those things. Neurologists have studied this. What they found is when you do that, all the pleasure centers of your brain light up. But here's the deal. They stay lit up all day. From an act of mindfulness, your mind stays awake and joyful the rest of the day. Try it. I've done it sometimes for months at a time. I feel like I walk on air by the time I'm done. Next one, I always say this every time I speak: turn off the news and avoid social media. I get a lot of grumpy old men in my office, and ditto. And I'll talk to them about what they do, and they spend 5 hours a day watching news. And I'm like, well, no wonder. We're already, let's face it, we're in a state of entropy, okay? We're in a state of the second law of thermodynamics. We're falling apart, okay? So why add things to you that are going to help you fall apart? maybe better to turn from those things. Another thing, spend as much time with children as you can. Again, that's why I like to wander out here. If you hate children, you have a real problem. It means you hate yourself. I worked at a small church in the South. I went to school in Mississippi. I worked at a small church, and they didn't have a nursery. So a few of us, a couple powerful church ladies and myself, we got together and we presented, well, let's do a nursery. And everyone said, well, why should we do a nursery? We don't have children. And so we did a nursery. And guess what? We got children. Joy of my life, sitting in the middle of listening to a sermon and hearing babies cry down the hall. It was better than the sermon. Spend as much time with children as you can. Next one, I have this as number 7. I don't know if it is. Very important one. Buy a dog. Not a cat, buy a dog. I love cats, but dogs have, in Buddhism we call it samadhi. They focus on one thing at a time. So when they're focused on you, they just love you. All right? And they're childlike. And I love cats, but I'm not sure about cats. I don't know that cats do that. Cats are a little bit more like very ornery sentient beings, you know. They're scheming when they're looking at you. So you can have a cat, that's cool, but buy a dog. Another thing that I do with homeless people, you can do this, apply this, you know, other ways, is I give money away randomly. In fact, I have a little thing in my office for homeless people, and people put money in it. And then I take it, I had my own money, and I put it in my truck in the little change drawer there. And I give it to homeless people. I don't ask what they're doing or what they're going to spend it on. It's really none of my business, but I give it to homeless people. The other day, I was driving in Vero, and I have this guy, I call him Buddha. And he sits in a certain place, and I didn't see him, and I went past him, and I went, oh, I forgot to give money to Buddha. And so I looked in my rearview mirror. Nobody was behind me, so I began to back up. So I started to back up, and then I looked in my mirror again, and then somebody was coming up behind me, so I had to stop. So I don't know what to do. I got this $20 bill in my hand, so I start waving it out the window at the guy. And he starts to move towards me, and so I wound it up, and I threw it out the door onto the sidewalk. And he comes running up there, and he grabs the money, and he's happy. But here's the cool part. The car behind me gave him money too. Give it away. A child would give it away. A child would give Buddha $20. Give it away. Another thing is do something crazy and get out of yourself. Release that kid that's in there. I jumped out of a plane a few months ago. You know what I really liked about it? Very good. What I liked about it was I had no control whatsoever. And it felt so good to have no control. Do something. Get out of yourself. Make a break. Do something. And finally, number 10, my final thought. Find the nearest field with a cow in it. Thank you for letting me speak today.